Right. Hello and welcome to Sober Banter. I'm Rachel.
I'm Colin.
And we have a special guest who is our 1 month off birthday twin. She got sober on December 22nd, just a few days before Christmas, like us to Thanksgiving.
Beat the holiday rush.
In 2021. And you want to say hi, Paulina, and I'll... Hello.
We are the people who couldn't make it to New Year's.
We are the people that couldn't make it to New Year's. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
We had the courage to stop before New Year's.
Had the desperation.
That's one way of putting. I mean, yeah, I feel like God yanked the cord.
Yeah.
For me, like the universe was like, we can't let this go on.
Yeah.
But that was a good, and we'll get into that. But I like the those of us who couldn't make it through the holidays. I'm like, that's how you know we wanted it.
It's like, and I still struggle because I just again, I was in so deep. I didn't even think about the holidays being that week, or I guess maybe Thanksgiving is a little lighter. At Christmas, I might, just because the decorations are so heavy, everywhere you look, and you have to buy presents for Christmas versus Thanksgiving. It's not, I don't know. Yeah, it's really, I couldn't have picked a day. I just couldn't.
I've recently encountered someone who planned a year in advance.
How'd it go? Or how is it going?
They have 90 days.
That's awesome!
You know?
Wow.
Yeah, where I'm like, you know what? There are the people who are like, I can control my sobriety day, and I did not. There was no plan of me getting sober until I got sober.
Oh, no. And, I already saw someone kind of do that. The podcast I said I used to work at, one of the hosts went to rehab, and he inspired a lot of people. And there was someone on Twitter who's like, I'm going to go on the 1st next month. And they take away your phone, and he's tweeting on the day 2. And I'm like, he's like, well, maybe next month. And I'm like, it's just hard. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way at all. I totally understand. It's just really hard because then you get all nervous and you're like,
well, it's one of those, I'll stop tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow comes and it's like, maybe tomorrow.
It was so much pressure. And I think the only way I could have done it is just, it was almost like ripping the Band-Aid, but I didn't know the Band-Aid was there. Okay. But let's talk about who you are first, because you, honestly, you have so many things that I've enjoyed. First off, your Substack, kind of how we got in contact, which is Newly Sober. Mm-hmm. Can I just say, I love the under the no caps. And
Thank you.
I seriously, it's made me look at how I type, because I'm really big about capitalized and explanation marks. And after reading quite a few, I'm like, the lowercase to, define, I don't have an authority in sobriety. Mm-hmm. It's literally, it gives me goosebumps because I'm like, that's a level I hadn't thought about when it comes to authority and voice, and even it's not a lower of ownership. It's just a more honest, I don't speak for everyone. I'm speaking from my authority,
Yeah.
And it was creative.
I appreciate that. I think part of that stems from the fact that I started writing the newsletter when I was 70 days sober, which is unhinged, insane, don't recommend it. I look back and I'm just I've always been very public about any sort of thing I'm going through. And so for me as a person, as an artist as a writer, it made sense in the moment to be like, I look around and I'm a marijuana addict in recovery, and I don't see anyone talking about marijuana addiction. All of the sort of addiction recovery books are from 5 years out, which is great.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was reading the same thing over and over again. And as a nonfiction creative writer myself, I had to write through the insane experience that I was going through, the life-altering psychic change that had I've just endured. And so part of it was I was afraid of old timers being like, she doesn't know what she's talking about,
If you had someone say that to you, you're doing it right. So, I mean, that's just like that. I think that's a way of passage. What did we call them yesterday? The pirates of the room.
Yeah.
They're like the just guarding the treasure.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally, I totally did not feel like I had authority, but I also felt like my experience was the only authority I had. And, as a writer, I think about grammar all the time, and it felt liberating to say, okay, like one way to really convey that I don't have authority is through this grammatical stylistic choice.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad it resonated. Yeah.
It was definitely, again, in newsletters, podcasts, TV shows, you're wanting that different spin, that different angle, like what makes this. And that caught immediately. Like, I loved it. So
thank you.
But beyond that too, you've also co-authored a book. And my parents, when I had said that could have been a helpful tool, I say parents, I mean my mom, man, the sex talk did not happen with us. Like, I think they slid like a magazine journal under my, it's just like, I had said, could I imagine like writing a book with my dad? And my mom laughed so hard. And I'm like, no way. Like, there's just like, I don't, or even my mom. Not even him. I would not write it. Like, I'm so not raised that way. And I wish I was.
Well,
it's impacted me for a long time.
My sex talk came from my lesbian mom. So that was a really
story.
eye-opening.
You should tell that story because you said that's the first time you blacked out sober.
But no, that came later. I could tell that story. But yeah, that was...
I need to hear all of it. I need to know everything.
Yeah, my parents divorced because, my mom came out. But yeah, I never really got the sex talk from my dad, but I did from my mom. And when I used to do open mic stand-ups, one of my bits was something like... I didn't get the birds and the bees speech. I got the bees and the bees speech. And
that's a good bit.
Well, I thought you were like when you went to College Station for the first time.
Yeah, so there was another time.
That's what I was thinking about.
I was like, 18 years old. This was the first time I've ever blacked out sober because I still don't remember what happened. I just remember what led to it. But I was going to College Station with a friend, freshman year of college. So I'm waiting in the living room for my buddy to pick me up because we're going to drive down there. It's 3 hours from Dallas to get to A&M. And my mom wasn't there, but my mom's partner was there. And she was like, okay, do you have everything? And I go, yeah, I got my backpack, got that. Danny should be here soon and we'll go. She's like, okay, that's great. That's great. I have a quick question, Colin. What are you going to do when a girl wants to suck on your penis? And I was just like, and I do not remember what happened. I just remember being in Danny's car, just shell shocked still. And he's like, why are you
like white as a ghost? And he's like,
I was like, this just happened. And I have no recollection of.
He doesn't remember what he responded with. He doesn't remember if he just walked away.
Just so out of the blue, out of nowhere, from my mom's a lesbian partner to throw that out.
Also just like one of the most like insane way to say that. Like, I can't help but be like, only a lesbian would be like when she wants to suck on your penis, like that feels like a very lesbian framing of what that is, not what are you gonna do when she wants to give you a blowy, like
it's like, oh my god.
Well, she's a counselor too.
I know. And again, there
she's a marriage counselor.
The legend, the legend has it that was the day your alcoholism started.
Yeah, that could have been it,
because then you went to A&M that weekend, and I'm sure you're like, we gotta go.
We did drink a bottle of Sky vodka that night. I know that.
I would. Yeah, I mean,
when you're 18, that was really nice stuff.
So that is high level at 18.
All I'm saying is kudos. I think that's really just it. That's something, again, I don't feel there's as much resources. There's a lot of resources from adults, certified counselors, social workers, peoples with masters in, sex education, but having the perspective from the person getting the talk is, it's really, I think, again, very unique spin, very
Yeah.
helpful, because I know I wouldn't know even where to start if I were to write from the other side, because it didn't really happen. And I mean,
Well, it also didn't really happen for me either. And I think that's the irony of this is like, so the book is a teen guide to consent. It's called It Doesn't Have to Be Awkward. I wrote it with my dad. At the time I had just graduated from a prestigious MFA program. I was like, my addiction was like accelerating, but it was like, you know how they say it's like magic, medicine, misery. Like I was in the magic phase, but it was accelerating in like a kind of profound way. And 3 months after I had graduated, I was selling t-shirts at my dad's podcasting event in New York City because my mom was like, "What are you doing August 17th?" And I was like, "Oh, are you guys in town?" She's like, "I need you to sell t-shirts." So I'm selling t-shirts that say like Dr. Drew After Dark and uh, what was it? Was
Did you want to do any of that?
No, of course not.
Okay, I was like, I don't know if I'd volunteer, or I've done some stuff with my parents.
That's
but...
voluntold.
Yeah, like I think my parents both have a history of like my mom's dad ran a hardware store, so she worked in the hardware store, and my dad's dad was a doctor, and he inherited his in practice. So there's a lot of like family business, like child labor thing.
Like everyone else, child labor. Like, I mean, it's the only we do have. I'm bad with Evan sometimes. If I can't get in the sparked mood to do something, I'm like, if I pay you $5, you want to do it with me? So I'm not like,
at least you're paying,
Oh no, that makes it even worse. Oh no.
No,
so sorry.
I did not get paid.
And
yeah, so the other t-shirt, the other t-shirt said like, you shouldn't prolapse your anus. Like these are the shirts that I'm selling at this podcasting event.
That's not
my dad
at all.
No, and I'm just, chugging vodka sodas. And my dad walks up and he's like, "So we sold the consent book today." And I was like, "What consent book?" He's like, "The consent book. We talked about it." And I was like, could not conjure the memory. And so for a long time I called it the consent book I didn't consent to. Which, catchy title.
It is a really catchy title.
Yeah. But can't you like feel the resentment in it? It's just like, it's like crackling. So we wrote it in 6 months, and all the while, like I was just, I stand by that book. That book saved my life, but I was stoned writing the entire thing.
I mean,
like, yeah.
To get through, I think I could say, you could say, we've accomplished things in our addiction as it was progressing, but like it was kind of, that's how I look at I don't regret the past, because I needed that tool at that time. Because what would I have done?
Yeah.
That was survival.
True. And I appreciate that. Because I definitely, because I'm an alcoholic and addict, I definitely have that black and white, like, that was bad and now I am good, and it's like, actually that was all I was, that's how I could do it.
Yeah.
Because it was a uncomfortable topic, but also,
it was a service.
The sex talk. Yeah, no, it complete. I mean, I got handed a book deal. Like, that'll never happen again,
Yeah. That's not true. Don't say that. Not gonna.
I mean, I didn't even have to sell it myself. Well, thank you, but I couldn't see it as the vote of confidence that it was, that my dad needed me for that project. And ultimately the central tenet of that book is TCB, trust, compassion, and boundaries. So if you trust yourself, have compassion for yourself, and know your own boundaries, then you can trust someone else, offer them compassion, and respect their boundaries. And that, writing that, learning that, promoting that is foundational to why I got sober.
Okay.
And so it's this sort of serendipitous thing where it's like, of course, this thing that I resented and was, an obstinate, entitled, accelerating drug addict about, actually gave me the tools to climb out of an engagement addiction, and so it's just funny how life is like that. Like, it's like,
life is so lifey. That's what we say. We're like, life. And well, I did I want to ask, so I know that marijuana is like a big topic. So I think for me,
Mm-hmm.
I was more drink then smoke. I think
Mm.
you were more like you could smoke first, and probably you would probably be okay just smoking and not having to add drinks.
I mean, there was a period where, yeah, I didn't really drink. I was just quote unquote a stoner.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of it comes from, this, and you probably maybe thought this something similar, and I don't know how it started, but you get this idea that, well, if you're smoking, you're not really an addicted. It's just habit forming. So it's not a real addiction. You can quit anytime. And it's my muse, because I always wanted to be like some sort
Mm-hmm.
of like sketch writer or stand-up comedian. It's like, well, I really need to do this to get the juices flowing. But I would never
Yeah.
write anything. I just end up watching Netflix
Yes.
all day long or something like,
Yes.
like that. It just makes you lazy. And then you want to be like, no, it doesn't make you lazy. It's not a gateway drug. It's not this, that. But it really is all those things. And it's that
Yeah.
addiction or that disease in you that's telling you otherwise.
You also
Um,
never had where I did. There were some times I would just get really anxious. Like, I mean, or I would go down that
Mm.
dark, and that was the only time I learned like indica is in the couch and
oh,
Uh-huh.
sativa. Yeah.
sativa is like the I really I think I stayed to sativa. I don't even remember. It's been a while, but
Yeah.
you know, I would get scared because I would have a bad experience. And
Yeah.
I can think in particular in Colorado, we took a more than our share of edibles and went to
Oh.
the where you slide in the tubes down the snow.
Uh-huh.
I had like a panic attack. He was having the best
Oh
time of
my
his
God.
life. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
ate the same thing, but I like wanted to get out and he's just like chilling.
Well, I'm just
And
not an anxious
Yeah.
person in
I
general.
know.
So I
Mm.
think that helps.
And that is where I think it scared me sometimes. So it wasn't the same
Yeah.
every time for me. Alcohol, the only one that was different was vodka. Vodka made me cry. And
Yeah.
most of them, I like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would cry happy, sad. I would be like, this puppy's so cute. And I would just bawl my eyes out if there was vodka in me.
Yeah.
And yeah. So what do
I think I
you,
can relate to that. I mean, I appreciate, like, both of you are emblematic of the spectrum of cannabis use. And I think,
personal
whether
experience?
it's, yeah, well, it's like if you have an anxious reaction, you feel ashamed because you're not supposed to be anxious. It's supposed to be this euphoric thing, when in reality it does produce anxiety. And the more you use it, if you have anxiety or you use it for anxiety, it actually produces anxiety. So I think because of the rhetoric used to legalize, there's a lot of misinformation about the substance itself. And so, when you become a daily user, it's easy to justify it and say, oh, it's medicine. Oh, it's a creativity thing. Oh, it's non addictive, all these things. And that totally fueled me, like,
Hmm.
not, I mean, it did sort of. The first time I truly got high, it was that sort of like, you hear in the rooms all the time where they're like, I drank and the sun was shining and I like felt like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had
yeah.
arrived,
No, I have had that too
Um,
though. You know, it's
yeah.
just it never was consistent. And
Mm,
but for Colin it
yeah.
was pretty consistent, I feel like.
Well, the dosages, like just in the 90s, THC content in a joint was like 3%. Now it starts at 13%. So we're not smoking, Grandpa Jim's Woodstock weed.
Hmm.
Like this is genetically engineered to be addictive. Because when it's addictive, because then you are a lucrative, like, you are the commodity. You know what I mean? Like, to get you addicted means that they're going to make more money. And I sometimes I feel a little like conspiracy theory about it, where I'm just like, big marijuana is big tobacco. Like, it is the same lobbyists, it is the same mechanisms, but the rhetoric has been so, like, they put a lot of money into making sure that everybody was convinced it's medicine,
Yeah.
and as a marijuana addict, it's kind of, discussions like this where I feel like, people come to me where they're like, I did get anxious, or, what, I couldn't stop. And it's like, it's kind of like, I'm the defective. I'm not reacting right when in fact that is actually more common than, because it's like, you know, by the end of it, I was doing dabs, which are like 80% THC.
Oh my God.
And
so
like,
I never tried that. Did you?
Yeah. I passed out when I did it.
Yeah. First time I did it, I felt my soul leave my body, and then I projectile vomited onto the couch and the dog, and then I shook in the bathtub, the empty bathtub, for 3 hours, and that was like just the first time. You know, like I didn't even like it. It was like dabs are weed to a methy degree.
You see, and the funny thing is, you went back and did it again.
Yeah. Oh, that's because I'm an addict, you know? Like,
that's the mind of an addict. A normal person would have had that experience and been like, I'm done.
Never again.
Yeah.
Man, I boot and rally. Like, I'll be like miserable from alcohol, and I'm like, when's the last time I took a shot?
Yeah, but you threw up on
your... I threw up 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, so you threw up on your dog, went in the bathtub, shivered for 3 hours, then probably a couple days later, you're like, maybe I just had a bad reaction.
No, yeah. It was like, oh, I ran out of flour. I guess I'll do dabs. You know, it's like, the more time I have sober, like I was never a normal drinker. Like my nickname in college was Barflina because I would either vomit or black out every time I drank. So it's like, I was never a normal drinker, but it was celebrated. And, you know, it's like in college, it's like exciting to be a mess, you know?
Yeah, I didn't even make it. I was so messy. I was like, no, I couldn't finish college. I'm back now, and I'm happy it turned out that way because I just have more.
Oh yeah.
Connect. Like I care.
Yeah.
Well, there's some classes I wish I would have not remembered, but there are ones like where I'm getting my major in that I really love, and
that's amazing. That's huge. Like
it's different. I do feel older, and you know, whatever. There's also a lot of bad things about online college, and people don't understand. It's the professor teaches online and in person. The material, because I'm at Arizona State, so I'm like,
okay,
it's not like just a digital class. I have to have all this stuff actually for my school, because you're monitored on camera, like when you're test taking. Like you are, it is not as like, I'm just going to Google the answers online. Like, I mean, in your in-class discussions, you have to listen to lectures. They see what activity you have on your profile, so they can see if you only logged in. So it says your login learning time. And yeah, I mean,
that's amazing. More. That's amazing to know that exists in that capacity. Like,
oh yeah,
what a amazing tool. And like my partner, he's also he went to community college and then didn't finish school, and now is doing his undergraduate degree. And you know, I'm so impressed by people who go back to go to school, because it's so much. It's, you know, of course, you know, learning isn't the hard part. It's the balancing life and being the oldest person in the room and like being with like 19-year-olds, you know, like that's the difficulty of it. And I'm so impressed by people who take non-traditional paths, because it's harder. It's just harder. You know, you have more dependence on you and jobs and all that stuff. So congratulations. That's a big deal.
I don't want to say one's harder than the other. Like, it's just a learning. So is your partner going to school like where you are, or online?
So we are California based, but we are spending the year in central Minnesota for a job opportunity he got. So he is doing a few classes online. He's at a Cal State.
Nice.
And so then we'll go back and he'll finish probably next spring. But yeah, I live in central Minnesota. That's a whole other experience.
Do you like it or no?
I like the state of Minnesota. Where I live, I'm really experiencing the rural-urban divide for the first time. And it's a privilege to not really understand that until I was, you know, the ripe age of 32. And it's been very existential because, you know, I'm LA raised, spent 10 years in New York, spent 9 months in Chicago. Like, I've only ever been in metropolitan major cities.
Right.
And so that's its own rarefied experience, you know?
Yeah.
And so to be not only in the middle of a state, but to be in Minnesota, like, it is the polar opposite. Everybody's Jim and Joel and Mary and Don, and they have 10 siblings, and everybody is Catholic and
so very much like
you're pretty good at the
Fargo-esque.
I'm living in Fargo. Yeah. And I've
Okay.
been working on the accent. I listen it. So don't you know. So,
So good.
you know, we all they all go to rehab in Minnesota. Everybody goes,
Oh,
I went to
okay.
You
treatment.
send them off to the farm.
Yeah.
That's what you're
Oh,
supposed to.
they're
That's
all
what
at
Bill
Hazelden.
says. Go to the farm.
Yeah. No, they literally, because actually Minnesota is known as like the land of 10,000 meetings, because
Really?
Hazelden is the original rehab, like it's the one,
Yeah, I
and
know.
so
Yeah.
a
I love
lot of people
Hazelton.
come.
Okay.
Yeah.
AA banter, like there are so many group conscience meetings over, can we let Hazelton be read? Can we not? Like ODAT incorporates Hazelton's one day at a time.
Okay.
Oh.
Like those little books
Mhm.
I have.
Yeah.
Like that one right there. Here,
Mhm.
grab it. The one day at a time.
One of my best
Yep.
friends got sober on ODAT.
Yep. So it's from Hazelton.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like these little quick.
Yeah. They have a lot of readers. Apparently.
And yeah, I mean it's supposed to be a great school.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's so wild being in a place where everybody's like, so I couldn't stop drinking, and so I went to treatment, and in treatment, and it's like, how many people would benefit from that but don't have that state infrastructure, like
Mhm.
it's been whereas in California it's like, I couldn't pay for treatment, does anybody know anything, it's been a very different cultural experience, and going from LA meetings, which are like 400,000 a day, to like 8,
Yeah, my
and
grandma went in Santa Monica. That was where so she lived on 12th Street, and like literally right in Wilshire.
Oh.
So I'm like right over there. My cousins and stuff still live right over there. But I grew up like walking to 3rd Street Promenade, and that was, and again, this is 20 years ago. So this was back when you'd actually like, it wasn't what 3rd Street was what it is today. It's so sad. Like it was safe. It was,
no,
last
it's
time I
not
went, it
that
wasn't
anymore.
the same. It wasn't,
Yeah.
And I really want to go again to, it's Central City, the mall outside, or Centennial, Century City, right?
Yeah.
I was like, I used to go there too. Again, I think it used to be a lot safer. I don't know how it is today, but
Yeah. California, it's my boyfriend and I are both like ready to like move back, if I'm, being honest.
no, I loved
like
it. I mean,
yeah, but it's also like being in a state where like you can't even get a prescription filled if your prescription is like more than 2 years old. Like being in a state where there's like actually like parameters to like take care of you. I had my first like real eye test, because legally they could not sell me glasses with my 2017 prescription, and
yeah.
it's little things like that where, and it's not even political. It's more like I can feel the ways in which people are cared for here in a way that isn't the same in California. And I love California. Like I will one day when my parents die, buy a house.
You're like, I'm going to buy. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like I'm invested in putting roots down there. I am from there,
It's beautiful. I wish there's not anything in Dallas. I do love Dallas. There's nothing wrong, but there's nothing to look at. I mean, nothing.
We're very flat. Yeah, I lived in Phoenix for quite a while, and I really missed it. And even when I was so excited to take you to Phoenix for a friend's wedding, because you're in the valley and there's mountains everywhere to look at.
Can you imagine if we weren't sober though and went? Because you said you'd always wanted to take me, and that was before we got sober.
Yeah.
And we went when we were sober, went to Sedona, did meditations like in the vortex, and it was spiritual. And I feel like
That's
California will have some of those things. It not in LA, but people don't understand the suburbs. Like even Hollywood is not what people think Hollywood is. It's kind of, unless you're driving up behind the sign, which is where my grandma's clients used to be, is
I'm from Pasadena. Like I'm not LA, like Pasadena is its own thing. And to put Hollywood in perspective, I'm very I'm very sensitive to smell, and
oh my god, not the place for you.
Yeah, so my boyfriend and I went to this like beautiful, there's this restaurant called like Mother Wolf, and like once a month we like blow out, do something vibey, whatever. We had this beautiful dinner, and we were going to go see a documentary at the Egyptian Theater.
I've
And
been
so
there
Teresa
too.
was like,
That's beautiful.
yeah. And he was like, let's like walk on Hollywood Boulevard. As soon as we hit Hollywood Boulevard, like weed and like body odor and
Like
human
not
shit and desperation hit my nostrils, and
Desperation.
I just vomited onto the streets of Hollywood. And then I started laughing because I had just vomited on the streets of Hollywood.
yeah.
And this was, 6 months ago. And so he like pulled me and we like went on the side streets or whatever. And so that is my Hollywood. I am not built for Hollywood. I am okay being in Pasadena. It's like
It's just not the same. Like it's
no, it's not
and
safe.
even
It's not safe.
I got to see Wicked at the Hollywood Theater with my grandma. And again, this was 15 years ago. And is it still there or did they tear it down? I was like, no, it's still there, right? Or is it still like it? Because it's kind of like in the interjection, the Hollywood Theater. Like, I mean, and it's not as big. It's very old. It's very. Anyway, my grandma took me to all these great things. I had no idea to appreciate them at the time. I just thought of
Well, you're probably being a normal teenager.
I just thought of the most random thing. And my grandma, she used to, we would go, if we went to a hotel, we went out of town, she would take all the little samples and we would bring them back to Santa Monica. And we would, when we were walking to 3rd Street, we would give them to the homeless people. We would go give them the shampoos, the shower. And at first I thought it was weird because in Dallas, first off, the homeless population was not what it was there. Yeah. But at the time, again, 20 years ago, so if I'm 30, it was like when I was 10, and it wasn't as dangerous to hand a random stranger, you didn't think about a gun or knife being pulled on you. Like that wasn't, they were just appreciative of, we would bundle all the little hotel stuff and go hand it out all around the park. And I mean, there was space between people. Yeah. Again, like now it's just so, it's
an epidemic. It really, and it's also legally, you cannot help them unless they have dementia.
Really?
Otherwise, yes. Otherwise, the state of California renders that, like, they don't have sort of like the rendered of insanity. Like if you're a harm to yourself, they can hold you for 72 hours. But unless you are a geriatric experiencing dementia on the street, no one can help you legally. That you have to be willing to commit yourself. And the thing that's so devastating about that is like a lot of it is meth. And how,
I was going to ask which drug.
Yeah. And from our experience, what did it take to get willing to ask for help? And this assumption that these people are operating to the height of their capacity.
Yeah.
As active addicts, right? And it's like it's this double. It's a very strange line to straddle because it's it's assuming that they want to be there, but how much of our active addiction did we really want to be there? How much of that was clear thinking? And so it's difficult. It's difficult because it's like someone has a whole tent encampment in a hoarder, clearly meth village, and as a person in recovery, I'm like, if I was like that, I would want someone to help, And so it's hard. It's hard to witness. And it's also, again, it's like sort of just like the state is not doing what it could,
And where you're at now, so Minnesota, the weed's not legal, correct?
Or it is legal.
It is? Okay, because I was going to say it's not legal here. So it's not as, like we don't have any shops or, I mean.
So what we do,
we know who to call if we really wanted, but we don't.
Yeah.
Here's one of the strange things that I wanted to ask you about is getting more insight on, the addiction process. So weed is not legal. Yet if you go to a brewery, you can get infused THC alcohol or beer. So I guess it's not alcohol, but it's THC.
Isn't that weird?
Beer.
Well, because it's imported in the beer, the way that it crosses the state line, I think it's because it's infused in the brew.
That must be a loophole.
But it's not brewed in Texas.
And then we have a bunch of instead of marijuana shops, they are CBD shops, and they'll sell all these other.
Which apparently, if you ask the right words at the right CBD shop, they might have some behind the. I heard that they were like going on a bust on those. I've never even stepped foot in one.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been to, what's the silly place that we've gone before, like before we were sober?
Oh, the smoke shop?
Yeah, it's called something.
Oh, gas pipe.
Gas pipe. I was like, I think those are like everywhere.
But those are
yeah.
more selling pipes. But I did find it interesting what you were saying. And you're right. It's almost like the lobbyists, like big tobacco, they're trying to make in the states that weed is legal more addicting. So you come
Yes.
back to them because you
Yes.
said what they have now is different than they had 20 years ago. It's different what they had 30 years ago and 40 years ago. So they see the profit in it. And it's like, okay, we need people to come back. So you're right.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that, but you're definitely right. Whatever's out now is more addicting or stronger than 20 years ago.
They wrote about that in this article. They said at the current research, and there's also THC withdrawals, which people, they're like, that is not a myth. It takes 42
real.
days for someone who's a daily user to withdraw.
Yep.
Completely.
It really takes about 6 months for you to fully.
So what
because it also stores in your fat.
Is the withdrawals this like your same basic withdrawals, or because that's something I kind of never really thought about.
Anxiety, depression.
Okay.
Withdrawal starts 3 weeks after someone's last dose. It's physiological, behavioral: sleep, nausea, restless, insomnia, perception, irritability, disrupted, tremors, weight loss, decreased appetite, increased body temperature, anxiety, depressed mood, aggression. Oh my God. And loss in vision, lost in motivation, or maybe I wonder if it's like more sensitive to light.
And these are all the withdrawal syndromes.
Yeah.
That seems like something if someone stopped, they would be like, oh, I just need to smoke more weed.
And this is according to
more, or
according to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Huh.
Yeah, I lost 20 pounds my first month sober without even trying.
Yeah,
like it was, it's just like, my body just like completely, like, well, first of all, I wasn't taking bong rips and ordering cake to my door anymore.
Right?
You know?
Like, calories of alcohol too. Like Jameson had a lot. And I was like, you guys just cut like 4,000 calories out of my diet.
No, for real. And I also was like, oh, I don't have a problem with alcohol, but I'd rather like misidentify as an alcoholic if that means I get to go into the fellowships that are alcohol based. And then I would like read my journals and be like, I drank 2 glasses of wine and a whiskey. And like, it's like, it was always, and. And so I think I also went through like physical withdrawal from alcohol, but it really took 6 months for my body to recalibrate. I was like taking like 3 naps a day. I was like sweating. Like my mood was all over the place. Oh my God. Like Christmas.
So talk about Christmas sober, because that's probably something that can help someone. We're going to put this out before Christmas. And what was it like being just a few days sober
Okay, I'll tell you the story.
You don't have to.
It's good. It's good. I haven't talked about it in a while. So, I'm going to have 3 years in a week, God willing. And like, I can't believe it. And basically every anniversary that I've had, it's been like this sort of disbelief, but also I think the sort of weeks leading up to it, I get my most resentful and squirrely, and like
everyone does.
I get so weird. And part of it is because my bottom was traumatic, and every year that I have sober is more distance from my rock bottom, and so I'm able to see it with more clarity. And it's kind of just like, oh my God, like how did I get there? Really but also feeling immense gratitude because I needed to get there. And so the short of the rock bottom story is I was driving from New York to New Orleans to spend Christmas with my ex-fiance's family. And we ran out of weed and decided to do a sober Christmas. And part of that is because I would get stoned, like so stoned that I felt like I could like feel my joints connected to my bone and like muscle dripping off my body. And I would like turn to him and be like, please help me stop. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then I'd wake up the next day and like we'd smoke. I couldn't even get like past 11 a.m. And it was very much like, I want to write, but if I don't smoke, I can't write. But if I smoke, I know I can't write. And so I'd end up stoned in the bathtub, not writing. Like this was the cycle I was in.
The wash cycle.
Yeah. It's like I didn't genuinely try to stop, but there were moments of like profound, like, not grief, but panic of just like, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I don't want to be doing this and I can't not do this. And also by that point, it was like 50 milligram edible to
Oh
feel
no.
something, like my tolerance was so insane. And
Oh no,
a
that's
lot of it was
50.
yeah, it was disgusting. It was just like, and then the thing about like edibles and those THC drinks, like they last longer. It's like a whole different high, and it's not comfortable.
No, it wasn't when I was on the snow. I mean, I had a panic attack.
Yeah, it's like there's been so many times that like I got high and couldn't remember my name or like couldn't figure out gravity, and it's like
Yeah.
part of that was because I wanted to obliterate my consciousness, and then part of that is because I wanted to see what it was like and I needed to get higher. And so we decided to do sober Christmas. My ex was another fellow sick and suffering alcoholic addict, but I perceived him as being worse. I would, walk his dog, do his laundry, cook the meals, wash everything so that he could, do dabs morning, noon, and
So
night,
that was him.
ketamine, shrooms. Yeah,
He
you.
thought I was worse. So he's like, he was functioning with a job. I was the one struggling, jobless, not in school, stay at home mom. Not that that's
Yeah, I
not
know.
a job, but
Yeah.
yeah, he thought I was
It's
worse.
so easy. It's so much easier to stay in place when you can see someone and be like, "Well, I'm not that," you know? And so we both got in this car and it was our first day without weed, and over the course of that 3-day drive, he went into weed-induced psychosis.
Oh no.
And weed-induced psychosis is something that I have experienced firsthand. In my first year of sobriety, I saw it 3 times, another time like I've seen it so many times now. That part of like my, I don't know, agenda is a strong word, but it's like, how can we deny that this thing is mind altering and
Right.
addictive when I'm witnessing people just like absolutely lose themselves? And the thing about weed induced psychosis is, yes, you can get psychotic from, using a lot, but also when you stop using, that's also what can trigger the psychosis. And so that's what happened with my ex. And so my first 3 days sober, I was in a car with a psychotic person.
Oh my god, that had to have been
And
terrifying.
yeah, and so day 3, I'm an hour outside of New Orleans, and we pull into an Alabama gas station, and I had a panic attack in an Alabama gas station, like fell to my knees, like rocking myself, saying like I can, like trying to tell myself like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, but I knew like I can't. I was saying I can't. And I like ended up praying to Elvis, who I'd been praying to since I was like 8 years old, and my dead grandparents, and I held onto a tree. Like that really was my surrender, and that was me really turning it over to a higher power, although I didn't have that 12-step language. But that was the moment where I was like, I stopped digging. I was like, I can't do this. And during that car ride, this is when the TCB stuff comes in. He is someone who considers himself an antinatalist. And so he believes that people shouldn't have children and we should walk into extinction hand in hand. And we had gotten engaged 7 months before that. And we would get high and he would scream at me about my desire to have children. And my desire to have children is this ineffable bodily spiritual thing that I couldn't articulate and convince him of. And so I would sort of get high to cope with him yelling, and he'd get high and more psychotic. And over the 7 months, it was a nightmare. It got bad. That being said, glad it happened because I wouldn't be sober without it.
So does that mean you started
However,
journaling after y'all kind of, because is
oh,
that
I
about the
was
same?
journaling the entire way.
Or you
I
said, so,
was writing
okay,
the
I was like,
whole.
okay. When you started the article,
Um.
the newsletter.
Oh, that was like 70 days sober.
Oh, 70 days. I'm like, why am I
Yeah.
thinking, say, okay, perfect. Just clarifying.
No, I at this point I was like, what is Substack? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't either. Terrified me.
Yeah. So got him to New Orleans. I flew back to LA at 6 a.m. the next morning. I like got to my parents' house and like I just remember I was like on my hands and knees, like scream crying. Like I had never felt so like, I mean, powerless. Talk about powerless. It was traumatizing. And, I remember my parents had gotten this like promotional sauna blanket. And as soon as I remember I was on the kitchen floor holding a pillow, and then I moved to the couch in a sauna blanket, and my brother was like, "Have you seen the new seasons of South Park?" And so I watched the new season of South Park in the sauna blanket, and it said like natural high or whatever. So that was probably the 20th. The 21st, we celebrated my mom's birthday. I had a glass of Chablis. I was like, don't let me smoke. But my, got served a glass of Chablis and I was like, look at me, one glass of wine,
Yeah.
And then my first true sober day was the 22nd. So that's what I rolled into Christmas with in 2021.
It's a lot of feelings.
And it was I don't know. This is a real special flavor of bodily experience. I don't know if either of you experienced. I hope you have not experienced, when you're hyper traumatized and you can't blink, and you're hunching, and people are talking to you but you can't hear them. That's what I came into Christmas with, which made it very easy not to drink, because moving through it. So the 22nd was my first true day. 23rd, I think I went on to a virtual meeting for the first time. And then the 24th is the first time I went to a meeting in person. My dad had suggested, have you considered meetings? And the irony of all this is that my dad is an addiction specialist and ran a rehab for 30 years. And, the cosmic drama of Dr. Drew's daughter as an addict is it writes itself.
I don't think so. Addiction does not discriminate. And I don't know how to, there are.
I think it's one of those things that it would be newsworthy for someone outside of addiction that doesn't understand it.
Yeah. It's
but
it's
for those that are, I feel like it's so random on how addiction gets. And you could make the argument that it can be genetic. You have a lot of addiction in your family, but
isn't that the thing about Priest's daughter though? You hear about even you think that just being surrounded by it makes you oh, you're also a saint, or just because, Evan doesn't see a lot of what I do for school or work. So I don't think I hope you don't feel that pressure that you're oh, I'm an oxymoron. I love that.
It'll sell a book eventually.
Addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't just handpick people. It's it doesn't matter what your name, your color, your race, how much money you have. Even there are celebrities that money was their downfall. That's
no, it's true.
People have said with my father, who his dad is a doctor and has had inheritance from, and my grandmother was successful. She lived in 12th Street, that was not a cheap area to live. And it's I have a lot of addiction in my family, and doesn't matter how expensive the alcohol is, it hits the same. I won't get addicted if it's Johnny Walker Blue. I shot that stuff. People were ashamed. They're you're supposed to sip and enjoy it, and I was like, I did, in a gulp. and this guy is he's buying. I remember this guy's buying. It's 120 a shot, and I'm like, let's go, another. He's like, okay, hold on. We're not spending Jerry Jones money here tonight.
No, it doesn't matter what it is.
And I would have drank the $7 stuff. It's because at that point it was addiction. It was the same about weed. Oh, if we buy higher end weed and it's been raised on a farm and a puppy goes and smells it every day and it's love.
Oh my God,
it won't get me addicted.
That was me.
Well,
but it did.
Like you said, because your mom knew that she couldn't just straight be I think you need to go somewhere. She waited until you were ready and asked for help yourself. Do you think that was your dad or your parents saying they're waiting for you to...
She waited.
Yeah, because otherwise, like you said, your dad's a specialist. He probably... It's not
we think we were hiding it so well, too. We're nobody knows.
It wasn't him. He was probably waiting for you to be ready.
I think For sure. And I don't think they understood the extent to
Yeah.
how bad it was. But they had, so it was kind of like a slow awakening. Like, we had written this book together, and because I had been preaching TCB over and over again when my ex was screaming at me in the car, I was like, oh, he's not showing me compassion. He's not respecting my boundaries when I'm asking him to stop yelling at me. It was like a cartoon T, like the trust shattered. And I was like, oh my God, how many times have I said your relationship is dead if you don't have TCB? Like, by virtue of my dad bringing me onto this project and us having these conversations, I was able to use those tools to realize, oh, this isn't, you don't marry someone like this, Um, and I remember sort of like the summer leading up, I remember I called him in sort of like a moment of clarity, and I was like, what should I worry about my health? Like, what should I like pay attention to? And of course, yeah. And the first thing he goes is, well, alcohol and weed for your brain. For like, that's always where he started, And it was, I think there was like one time during the pandemic, I had a really bad psychiatrist, and I was totally overprescribed all these like psychiatric meds, and I couldn't find a psychiatrist in the city because it was like the pandemic and everybody was looking for doctors, and it was a nightmare. And so my dad was like, I'll refill your prescription, but you can't smoke weed if I do that. And it was the first time that in a psychiatric context, that someone had said weed doesn't work. Like anytime I brought that up with a therapist or a psychiatrist, they were like, oh, that's fine.
They co-sign it.
But yeah, they totally co-sign it. And my dad was like, 100%. How do you know what your baseline is if you're smoking all the time?
Yeah.
And obviously he knows. I was like, well, I'm unhappy, and that's my baseline, and that's why I smoke, And so I think because he is my dad, I was able to, and then I had a conversation, like the week before the car ride, my brother came to town, and we like drank all night, and then we woke up the next day and we smoked together. And I think because we were both like able to enter that frequency together, because I really think of drugs and alcohol as frequencies, but they're false frequencies. Like they can feel like spiritual experiences, but they're, I've heard someone say like weed blocks your third eye, which I totally believe.
I think
it's
that's
just like
such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't do the chakras as much as I do.
No,
but that third eye chakra, man.
I get what you're saying there. That makes sense. And it's like
your mind's eye.
Yeah, because you think it unlocks everything, but it doesn't.
It really blocks. Yeah. And I was able to just like word vomit at my brother because my ex was at work. And I was like, I really think, I don't know if I can get married to this guy. I think his addiction problem is really bad. I was like, do you think I'm an addict? And he was like, yeah, I do. And that was hurt? The first.
I feel like that would hurt. If I never asked my sister that because I kind of have always known. But I think asking Aaron would be, or asking you, honestly, like anyone really close to me, I think that would be a really hard question to ask.
Yeah, because I lied to you. You had asked me. And it's like, in my head, it's like.
You were worse than me to me because you had different drug problems before we were together.
Mm-hmm.
So you were far, I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. But I didn't know if that was like hard hitting. Like,
I think I was so ready for someone to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
That I was just waiting for I was too afraid to ask myself that question. And I knew that he wasn't going to bullshit me. And I remember like after hours of talking, and he was getting a master's in psychology. So he was like playing little like armchair psychologist. I remember I lay down on the couch and I was like, oh, can you get a blanket for me? I'm tired. And he was like, no, you can help yourself now, is what he said to me. And at the time I was like, fuck you.
No. Hey, guess what? You can help yourself now. That's a good one.
I need to write that down.
Yeah, I was like, that's a really good one because that is where I didn't even know I could help myself anymore. And it's cool that we get to learn these types of things in recovery. It actually has nothing to do with the alcohol. Or the weed or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And man, I bet you also though felt like a load was off because I know I did when it was exposed and out in the open, it felt like the biggest weight or my darkest secret had kind of been, not to you, again, you were with me the whole time, but like to my parents, they said the exact same thing. They did not know maybe the extent.
Mm-hmm.
They knew how bad it kind of was. And I remember like trying to I'm sorry. Yeah, I did. You're going to hear it in the rooms. I used cocaine. And they're like, Rachel,
God
we
bless.
knew. you weren't that,
well,
you talked a lot.
There's no going back. Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like we knew it was some, and also the psychiatrist, if you're like tuning in, you're listening to this right now, not all psychiatrists are the same. I've had bad ones and I've had a great one. And yes, he's expensive. And I tell Colin, I go, he is my non-negotiable doctor. And he's great. And
he also works with you very well.
He got me sober, honestly. He put me on naltrexone without me knowing. He said, if you're being honest about your drinking, this won't be a problem. And I struggled taking that damn pill because I took it and I couldn't feel shit. I could only feel me. And I was like, so I would just not take the pill, which also makes you sick. And, you know, he was like, okay, if you're being an honest person, well, let's try this drug out. And that really did help me come to the realization I had a problem with alcohol. Like most people don't struggle to take a medicine that would make you drink like a normal or feel like a normal person. And also, again, you're not supposed to do any drugs. He's like, if you're being honest about your drug intake. So then the paranoia sets in of smoking weed with it. And I'm like, now all these secrets are like the same as kind of what you said when you're like told, okay, you know, don't mix this with drugs. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize how much and how often I want a drug. And now you're scared to take it. Now it's not reacting the same. It's making you more because you're like, I'm going to die at any second.
I love that your psychiatrist is like, if you're being honest, like just that phrase, right? Which is like everyone lies to their doctor. But it's most psychiatrists do not understand the nature of addiction.
Yeah.
Most doctors don't. And like, I'm very fortunate that my dad really understands addiction. Like really, like maybe better than I do. You know, like,
well, I think the perspective of someone who has had addiction will always be, that's like someone saying that, you know, they studied giving birth and they deliver babies, but until you give birth yourself, or I can't even say it, I didn't have a C-section. I have no idea what that experience feels like. I can textbook read it. I can imagine, but like addiction, that's why it's like addiction to addiction speaks so well. No, I'm not saying obviously there are people that are very, very good at understanding the complexities, but it's the internal feeling is really hard to convey unless you've been through it.
Of course. And that's the beauty of recovery communities is like, we get it, you know, and it's like being on the other side of it and understand, like today someone was like, I've only done 2 things good in my life. I haven't had a drink in 44 years and I've been married for 55. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, I have no idea what either of those things are like. You know what I mean? But like, I hope to one day, like, Sue knows what it's like to drink too much, you know, like I mean, that's the beauty of recovery is finding other people who are like, I know what that's like. And also like think, and I use the word God a lot. I pray to Elvis. So like when I'm not thinking about a man in the sky, I'm thinking about like
my grandma kissed him when she was in Vegas back in the
60s.
Yeah, 70s? she saw him outside, and one of the things I have of hers is a whole pack of Elvis like stamps and stuff. It's nothing that fancy, but I was like, she always talked about how she met Elvis. She also told me all the famous people she met at meetings, and I'm like, Grandma, I don't think you're supposed to say that because like, and man, I'm telling you, I got
that's LAAA. It doesn't. You can tell anybody.
Palm Springs she's like the gays and the grays. That's where we are with the gays and the grays. And well, I love Palm Springs too. And now that she's not there, I mean, I guess we could go travel vacation out there, but it sucks that I miss her. She was 26 years sober, so
wow,
when
she
she
seems
died,
amazing.
and she was
Wow.
active in the community. And she, again, was a therapist. She graduated from USC and got her
Cool.
master's in social work. So
that's so cool.
that was,
She sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
think that's the beauty, is like you find all these people who have like insane life experiences, but can tell you in a way that's like, grounded. It's a gift. It's totally a gift, because as I'm like reliving, I'm thankful for the opportunity to tell the story of my bottom, because I think, when my first 90 days, I was like, I'm never going to do a bad thing again. I'm a different person. This is a new life. And like, it really became that way, but also like now I'm myself again. I'm like, damn, look at all these defects.
Man, I feel that so much.
But, I think those first 90 days are really magical, because it is a new way of life. And like, once you've hit that bottom, like it like I was psychically different. Like my moment of clarity opened this sense of clarity that I have never had. Like when I was 19, I had my first bottom, which was an eating disorder bottom. And like, that's when I was like, oh, I need to go to therapy and not make myself vomit anymore. And this was like, like that times infinity.
I was a huge binge eater. That's why I started seeing the psychiatrist. It wasn't for drinking. It was for binge eating. And I just learned
eating, cutting, using. That's the trifecta. Eating, cutting, using, You got one, you're probably going to use the others.
I was like, we're good.
But, like, I think that once you get it, those first 90 days really are magic. And like, I mean, Newly Sober is born of that time, and like, sometimes I'm wistful about my first year sober, because I was I was totally like, I mean, I did so much dumb shit, but also like, I also was awake for the first time in 29 years. And, remembering getting sober 3 days before Christmas, very intense. I wouldn't recommend, but also if you're in that scenario, you don't necessarily have a choice. It's just like, this is the cards that were dealt and this is how it played out. And I will say that having a sober date so close to Christmas is actually like every year, it's like I get kind of weaselly around my everything. Like last year, I think it was more like solemn and like morose, and this year has been more like resentful and like psycho, like just like rumination. But by the time I get to my sober birthday, there's this profound sense of magic of just it was so bad that I could not continue, and I still have abided by that choice. It's like the magic of Christmas can actually be this supplement to sobriety, where it's just like, I get to feel all of this,
Yeah, I know.
And
there's moments I can feel like I can pause a little bit more, like I wasn't able to do before I was sober. And like, if a moment of like my niece of something opening a present, like I can like be in the moment. And that was something I could never do before sobriety. I could watch, but it would be like a filter in front, like I'm there, but I can't, like, it's almost just hyper focus on a moment. And I'm like, I'm recording this right now. And I can actually remember it, because when I drank, I thought I was good. But the next day I'd be like, what did happened? Did we get the presents? Did we bring them? Did we forget them again? Cause we forgot them a couple times, like, that's not, I just remember that with Evan's first, maybe not even his first. I think the first one sober is hard. It was probably the next one. I think by New Year's, we were a little more leveled. How was your New Year's? Because that was kind of a hard one for us.
Yeah.
And we had, it was hard.
I was in my parents' house. I had just ended my engagement. I was probably 12 days sober, and I was watching the ball drop on CNN,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, I was supposed to be in New York having my final hurrah before we did dry January. And
Oh.
I cried so hard I threw up in my mouth. And then I
Oh.
called my dad, and he was like, "This is an outsized reaction." That was his big thing, was like, "You need to be right sized." Like, my whole first year was like him being like, "You need to work towards being right sized," which at the
That's a
time I was like,
great tool.
"Fuck you," but now I'm like, that's actually like a good goal for someone who's crying so hard they threw up in their mouth.
I've done some
Yeah.
crazy things, and I have been in that psychosis you've talked about. So I mean, and it was like either a bad medication or coming off of, which is why I'm terrified of like not getting my, because I'm still on mood. I'm on a ton of stuff now with autoimmune, but
Yeah.
man, I know. Is there any, so for like what's coming up? Number one, I know you talked about the Artist's Way 2025, but as far as your writing too, to help people that are newly sober, do you plan on, what is your schedule plan of kind of release? Are you doing things on about Christmas coming up? Are you doing any dry January? I can't believe that one of the SEO words right now, because I looked some up, is dry January
Really?
25. And I'm thinking what you just said. Oh yeah, people plan it because they're like, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, yeah. And it kind of made me sad, and it kind of made me feel, I was like, I remember when that was me. I remember when I was like, sober October's coming up.
Gotta get ready.
What did I used to say? New year, new me. And then it turned into new year, same bitch. And like, and that was what I used to, I'm like, yep, sorry. I thought it was a new me. Same bitch showed up, and I'm another drink in my hand. And I feel for people.
I do too. I mean,
you
it's
write
like, I
about it.
know.
So I didn't know if this is a good way to talk about what's coming up.
I haven't planned anything, but actually now you're inspiring me to do, because I write both essays on newly sober and how-to guides. So I have written a how-to guide for dry January. I haven't done one for Christmas, which would be interesting. Every year that I have a sober anniversary, I interview my dad about my sobriety, so that will be coming.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I'm actually in the process of developing a new newsletter about creativity.
You're a creative writer.
Yeah, and I lead people through the Artist's Way, which I'll be doing in January. So if anybody's interested, I'd be honored to have anyone or everyone. But
and I'll put a link in the bio for that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I newly sober has been like, it kept me sober my first year. Like, I was writing it weekly. I was really dedicated to documenting my own experience of early sobriety. And now I'm like, oh my God, no. So it all is behind a paywall. After like 2 weeks, my newsletters go behind a paywall, just because it's vulnerable. It's very vulnerable. It's like, it's like if I took your middle school diary and put it on Substack. It's like,
I know.
There needs to be a transaction. So for folks who are newly sober, it's only $5, and you can read as much as you want. And maybe I'll do a guide to Christmas.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And I just thank you for your time. Like,
of course.
Honestly, I'm so glad we connected on Substack.
This has been really fun.
And this is something, again, bringing something new that we hadn't discussed as much as, the other substances out there. And the language of addiction is pretty fluent, but it's, if you know, you know. That's probably should be the tagline.
Yeah. If you know, you know. No,
if you know, you know. And
thank you for having me, for real. And I mean, part of it is like, and we can say this because we're on the other side of it, but breaking through people's denial is not easy. And I think that's part of the problem, is that, people are active in this addiction, and the language and the culture supports it. And I know, it's like, you can't convince me. Otherwise, like, you heard my story. I played it to the logical end. I took it to a methy degree. I tried.
I think there's a lot of us that do. And it takes us longer to hit our bottoms that way, you know? And I'm telling you, you can do it on your own now. It's gonna be good. Like that line that you said, like, yeah, you go to, like, that's such a great way to look at things. You can go do it now. You have the power. You got the power back.
I wrote that down. That is a really good title.
It's still, yeah. Hey, listen, it's all yours. It's all yours.
I'm actually going to use it when I talk to Evan to go pick up his toys. I'm like, you can go do it now. You have the power.
Everything will be in the show notes. Again, Paulina, thank you so much. And I still am terrible at ending. I'm going to hit end record, but it's going to need to process for just a few minutes.
That's okay.
So give me 1 second.
Thank you for having me.